So, we're doing something a bit unusual this time.
Yes.
We are doing something moderately contemporary and not real. We put up not a quiz, a sort of survey to ask which episode people wanted.
Yeah.
And before then, various people contacted us to say things they'd like.
Yeah. There was a kind of open call for ideas, and something which came up more than once was this.
For various reasons, was not something I think we could have done a whole episode on.
No.
But we can do this now.
Yeah. So
Just it is
Neom, a
Saudi city of the future.
Yes, and we're going to talk about it. It is kind of a plan, kind of a meme, kind of unexpected turn in 21st century architecture. I think we're going to talk about what it is, and I think we're also going to talk a little bit about where some of the ideas come from. But it's going to be quite, this is
It's fairly inscrutable. You're listening to the bonus. Thank you very much for patronising our show. It's very kind of you.
Yeah.
And your continuing support.
Yes, all of that is much appreciated. So, Neom is the smart city of the future in Saudi Arabia. It has existed as an idea since 2017, when it was...
Or even a bit earlier, I think.
It was... I think that was when it was first announced.
Yeah.
And it has... I think very intentionally acquired some kind of online celebrity through a number of very well publicised and extremely daring visions of different parts of it. It's actually a whole kind of constellation of different proposals, all extremely out there, all in the northwest of Saudi Arabia. But the most famous of which is the Line, which we're going to talk about most. The Line is like a big linear city.
Obviously, the Saudi Arabia is a autocratic monarchy. Power is currently wielded by the son of the rather elderly monarch,
Yeah.
who has done a number of ill-advised things, but also is quite reasonably trying to have an idea for what the country's going to do after oil.
Yes.
It's a fairly obvious looming problem, and there has been a big campaign or a big program, which I think is called 2030?
Yeah.
2030, something like that. Vision 2030. And it features a number of some fairly sensible kind of urban interventions across the country and building up various things. And this big set of projects for essentially a special economic zone.
Yeah.
Occupying a chunk of the country in the bit... It's right at the bit of Saudi Arabia just adjacent to the Sinai.
Yeah.
Opposite, what's the Gulf called?
I can't remember.
There's the bit
at the top of the Red Sea.
Yeah, and it goes up in this kind of, there's a kind of rift which goes up from the bottom of the Sinai up through the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And there's kind of mountains on either side, and it comes down.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of Sinai is Sharm el Sheikh, collection of beach hotels.
Sharm el Sheikh and Hurghada as well, which are this is like adjacent to, and obviously, I mean, its position is obviously partly motivated by that like Red Sea Riviera location, where there are these big tourist resorts patronised by people from all over the world, but particularly Russia. I think there's a big presence. And also it's on the Red Sea, so it's also on this main sort of trade route through from the Far East into Europe.
And they're proposing to build a bridge to
Egypt.
Where it's quite close, which would circumvent Israel, I presume, would be the point.
Yeah, indeed. One of the wars was precipitated by blocking this gulf. Can't remember. Anyway, that's not really our wheelhouse.
But
Global geopolitics.
That's where it is.
Yeah.
Which is crucially away from the key urban centres of Saudi Arabia, such as they are.
Yeah.
Like
So
the relatively new capital, Riyadh, Jeddah, Mecca.
Yeah, Al-Dammam and
then
the holy cities, Mecca and Medina and stuff. Yeah, which are all So this is an area where very few people are at the moment.
Even less now. They've all been
purged. Yeah,
they've all been expropriated and driven off the land, or that's certainly ongoing.
So I think we should look at some kind of pictures of it because
so we could just say there's a region. It's fairly large.
Yeah.
It's the size of a small country. They say 2/3 the size of Belgium or something like that. Like stony hillside and bits of desert.
Yes.
It's going to be a special kind of legal cultural zone, and there's going to be various things built in it.
Yeah.
Various projects have been proposed, some of which are kind of things that are sort of really happening at the moment, and some of which seem slightly speculative, but the Saudi authorities talk very much as if they are going to do them.
Yeah, they include some of the craziest things I've ever seen seriously proposed. And the main one is the line, which is a 170-kilometre long continuous city, which I think it purports to be 500 metres high.
In parts. Well, they're quite cagey about it. Like, as soon as you examine anything, you find someone sort of contradicting it.
Yeah.
In the information for this. The kind of working program seems to be Mohammed bin Salman hires a whole load of consultants who brainstorm with him what's going to make this driver of economic growth, city of the future, and then they kind of hire specialists to work up the details. When we were talking about the Palace of the Soviets, we were discussing the institutional dynamics that lead to completely insane projects.
Yeah.
And I would say there's a little bit of that here, but the institutional dynamic is completely different. It's kind of autocrat wants some stuff, everyone is being paid to agree with him, but also make it look vaguely plausible.
But he also wants to see the most out there things that they could possibly be. I would say, if you were going to sum up what the pitch is, basically Saudi Arabia wants its own Dubai. It wants something which is a bit...
But it wants something vastly better and more special than Dubai.
Much, much better, and decades
something that
ahead.
will utterly eclipse Dubai.
So there were kind of early... I mean, Saudi have done also... They've had previous projects to build these sort of green cities. There was a plan to do some 10 years ago or something, which didn't come to anything. And then there were some kind of early visualizations of it which look a bit more like Dubai. They're kind of skyscraper-y things, kind of reshaping the coastline a certain amount.
And if we were going to describe the logic of what we see on the screen now, it's that we've got a coastal location on a busy shipping lane, also in a place where tourists go. We could make a special economic zone, have a city on the sea. People will go there on holiday, and you can have a port, and you can have the connection from Egypt through to the Middle East. Yeah, and it would be a sort of a kind of center. And I'm sure if you were doing the documents for it, you would say this is going to be like the Middle East's Singapore, and
that's
so on and so on and so on. And what they've drawn is something very much like Dubai, but.
No, but
that is not interesting nearly enough.
Yeah. Instead, what there are these, completely, they're very high concept, I would say.
In a way, they're like a series of kind of utopian provocations.
Yeah.
For
drawing pretty heavily on the history of utopian architecture, as we'll get to later. But they all have to have something which makes them kind of extraordinary and totally different from anything else. So we're looking at the moment at what's it called? Oxagon, which is like a partly floating, partly on land industrial zone in the shape of an octagon.
Yes, so it's an octagon. The sea runs through the middle of it. There's a port and industrial facilities on one side. Not in the visualizations. There's actually a kind of more real industrial base that's kind of out of picture, which includes various because a huge solar park and green hydrogen facility and various different sorts of desalination plants and things. They're all not in. All of these proposals in their visualizations are the pure conceit of the city in an untamed landscape.
Yeah, there's a lot of ice blue reflective glass in kind of red-brown, slightly Martian-looking
and this is
context.
Reflective low-rise squares floating in the shape of an octagon with a channel, and then the other half of the octagon is made up by a kind of port on the land. And some of the streets are water, and some of them are floating streets. Very little information is given about any of these. If you want answers to any questions, so do we.
Yeah.
But this is going to be the industrial city, the techno-industrial city of the future.
There probably is a lot more detail. If anyone has access to the like Ernst & Young or McKinsey reports written about any of these, email. There's also Trojena. Well, it involves skiing, but also a kind of enormous man-made cavern inside a mountain, and also these sorts of like pods on cliffs above a big man-made lake.
Which is kind of semi-cantilevered.
Yeah. And also I think they've demolished a mountain to make it.
And you can ski up hills if the video is anything to go by.
Yeah, there is...
It's going to be skiing.
There's going to be skiing,
and it's a kind of... This is their answer to Davos, perhaps. It's going to be where where creativity and reality collide in the metaverse.
Is that the actual... That's what they say?
Yeah.
Because I was going to say that like all of this is kind of the metaverse, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's what they say. I mean, we can get up some of the slides that when we've if we exhaust some of the basic facts, we can get up some of the very scanty information.
Yeah.
Which mainly consists of just slogans on slides.
Yeah.
But it's a ski resort. Sometimes snow is depicted on it. More often it is depicted as it in fact is, where there is no snow, or very occasionally a light dusting of snow, and a lake, an artificial lake, in one of the driest places in the world. I mean, although I imagine these mountains get any rainfall that there is, with a sort of series of sci-fi buildings dotted around it, including a giant hollowed out cavern. Yeah. Which seems to be full of like something rather glitzier than the highest end Chinese shopping mall.
Yeah.
But in that sort of language of deconstructivist shiny plastic and colour change LEDs.
They all have a moment where the like disco lasers come out as well.
Yes.
The dusk falls. Falls, and the
purple
disco lasers start to pulse.
So this is going to be Davos.
And then there is the line.
And the line is the city. So they do sort of propose roughly how many people are going to be in various things, and there's just going to be a few thousand people in Trojena, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And presumably lots of robots living in the octagon.
Mm.
And there's going to be 9 million people living on this linear city. So actually, it's 2/3 the size of Belgium. It's going to have the population of Belgium, but concentrated in only a couple of percent of the land. Yeah. They always talk about not touching 95%. But to me, it looks like it's even more concentrated than that. But that's partly because they never really represent any buildings other than the one thing that they're proposing at that moment.
And so the visuals of this, they kind of veer between like extremely banal and diagrammatic and mind-blowingly
science
fictional and extreme. So there are some where it's like the kind of idea is basically that you have a big line and there's a sort of big train and tunnels for transportation that run all the way down it, and then there are cars and various other things.
It's 3 layers.
Yeah.
As this is something put out in 2017. At the bottom, there's a kind of transport and service riser layer, which has some sort of high-speed rail, some sort of local rail pipes. The next layer is a shopping mall, more or less, with restaurants and offices and shops, which is pedestrian only, except for like autonomous electric
sort of buggies.
They look like the things you get to take your luggage around airports, or the like disabled assistance vehicles in airports. And then above that, in the section, is basically a park, which is pedestrian sort of circulation park, but in most of the representations is a combination of park and buildings.
And yeah, in the kind of earlier versions, they're these sorts of little nodal settlements all connected. But then in the more recent ones, which I think people have seen, it's become this 500-meter tall mirrored extruded skyscraper.
Or pear, yeah. So it's like it looks roughly. I mean, how? So they're 500. How wide would you say it is? So let's say it's like 70 meters wide or 60 meters wide.
not more than 100.
500 meters tall. So an aspect ratio not dissimilar to a pencil. There's two of them making up two sort of mirrored walls, and there's a few hundred meters gap between them. The outer surface is mirror glass. So in the desert you see a 500 meter tall wall, mirrored wall. And then between these two walls, which are inhabited, there's a sort of, I don't know if it's roof, but a kind of environmental zone where the inside wall is kind of broken up and they interpenetrate, making a kind of web of walkways and wondrous things on the inside.
There's a kind of cyberpunk shopping mall inside it.
Yes, but full of plants.
Yeah.
And trees and various cantilevering balconies.
Yeah, kind of metaverse stuff. There's a lot of it all inside there.
Judging by the videos, people can fly. People can fly in all of these settlements, actually.
Yeah.
The people's ability to fly in Neom is really key to the sell.
So I don't know. How do you want to do this? Do you want to...
It begs some questions, right? For example... Why? Why is this the proposal?
Yeah.
And I think we could
that they
try and think of why, because they have come up with this, and it's not like there are some sort of glib answers that it looks cool, but I think we could try and investigate.
It's kind of a meme. It's doing something that at the level of kind of publicity or advertising, isn't it? It's sort of.
Yes, but like if they're trying to drum up investors, it almost seems a bit too off-putting.
It's not. It's not investable in any way as a scheme, and in a way, they don't really need investors because they have kind of unlimited money. Or at least that's not really their problem.
Well, but they will need people to come.
Yeah, that's it.
Come and if it's going to be, I mean, what's the population of Saudi Arabia? Like 20 million?
Yeah, I think it's between 20 and 30, maybe like 28.
Yeah, so. I mean, it may be, and it would make sense to me that they would transplant a large proportion of the population to here.
Yeah.
But I get the impression that the people that they want is lots and lots of expats setting up shiny new businesses.
Yeah, doing basically like cryptocurrency and metaverse businesses, I think.
Yeah, various forms of Ponzi schemes. Pyramid selling.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's what's meant to be happening. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the sort of business case for this, well, what they want is they want to be less like Saudi Arabia and more like the UAE.
Yeah.
And they want to have the country to be a little bit more cosmopolitan. And
well, certainly this bit of it.
And to have a slightly more mixed economy. And... yeah,
I think actually what they want is for this project to be a new world center that drives humanity into a kind of transhuman state.
Oh, well, that would be nice as well. Yeah, I think that also...
Early on in marketing materials, the sort of first round of marketing materials, I think it's worth mentioning, included a number of things that seem rather like a child was describing their vision for the future. So there's going to be giant animatronic dinosaurs and a moon you can switch on and off made of drones that can project into the sky, and all the beaches are going to have the sand replaced with glow in the dark sand so that there's something really for people to come and see. And basically the pitch for all those things is like, people are going to come and do TikTok videos of it, and then everyone's going to come.
Yeah,
these are all genuine. These are all things that have been proposed in investor documents. Everyone's going to have a robot made, and SoftBank is going to work with scientists to genetically engineer the inhabitants for improved intelligence and longevity.
Ah, that's good. Yeah. Okay.
Also, every space is going to be subject to central surveillance, which is going to be interpreted through artificial intelligence to optimize the lives of the inhabitants.
Yeah, okay. Promote virtue and prevent vice.
I mean, those things are not particularly architectural. They do point to the... I mean, what that sounds like is a kind of more fanciful version of like Zamyatin's Wii that we talked about very early on.
It's not just that they've gone insane, I think, though. I think that if you're going to rationalise what's going on, I think that there's a few stages. So I think you identified one of them there, which is that in the last round of trying to do this, they tried to kind of implant that. I mean, the model has been that there are foreigners in Saudi Arabia doing various things, mostly to do with the oil industry, and they live in kind of weird compounds.
Yeah.
There is this sort of innate contradiction between the state as quite authoritarian sort of theocracy and wanting to have kind of aspects of like cosmopolitan globalism, like people coming.
I would say that what they seem to have been restricted to is for economic reasons, really.
Yeah.
Regarding the necessity of the pre-modern, as in pre-oil, really,
Yeah.
Saudi state did not have a developed economy, and it did not have developed institutions that would supply the necessary engineering resources and the kind of things that you need for a modern economy.
But I think that he has obviously decided that the thing to do is like the reason why the previous things didn't get out off the ground is because they're dealing with this kind of contradiction between their sort of power base, which is this like incredibly conservative sort of theocratic order, and what they want to create, which is something sort of forward-looking beyond the oil age, and that trying to do that in a piecemeal way doesn't really work. The best thing is to create this kind of master sort of enclave off in the corner of the country where very few people are, and away from everything else.
That the first step of this process was to try and move off the existing population.
Yeah.
It was a sparsely populated region, but there were people there.
Yeah.
Belonging to one of the tribal communities in Saudi Arabia, but that doesn't really mean very much. That's true of lots of the country.
Yeah.
And it was deemed necessary to they are not part of the vision.
Yeah.
The vision that is presented is gleaming new things in clear desert.
Yeah.
And that clear desert doesn't have any nomads in it.
Yeah.
All kind of grubby, roadside shops and things.
That's all got to go.
All roads at all.
Yeah. That's all got to go. And so partly it's about kind of creating, like the new thing has to be it has to be within the country, but it has to be on the other side of this kind of cordon sanitaire from the actually existing Saudi Arabia. And then I think which obviously is the first thing they decided, is that we're going to do this massive smart city and it's going to be here.
That's in a big way why I was thinking about Wii, because in Wii, there's a kind of dome, and beyond it, there's a jungle.
Yeah, that's
which cannot be touched, and you can just see the glowing eyes of the incomprehensible nature beyond, and then inside, there's a very strange techno-utopia.
And then having done that, like, why propose this rather than something which might be a bit more pragmatic or make more sense? And I guess they've just...
None of these are ideas that are truly like we've never come across anything like them before.
Yeah.
But they are all rather curious interpretations.
Yeah, and they all have like quite significant implementation problems.
Yeah, I think we could start with what they're trying to do. We can sort of deal with... I think most people will be able to fill in both the political unpleasantness of what's going on, and some of the technical difficulties should be apparent to...
Yeah, but why go so high concept, I guess, is the question.
Well, so first, why go this concept at all?
Well, go...
So some things are like... Various things are shapes, and ideal cities... There's a long history of ideal cities being a particular geometric shape.
Yeah.
A circle, a pentagon, a square. And there is a history of linear cities as well, which... has served various ideological and practical purposes for different people.
Yeah, we could talk about that a little bit. The linear city is basically... So the linear city is obviously the biggest component of this. I think that a lot of this fits into... There does seem to be a bit of a thing at the moment of people like ripping off ideas from 60s utopian designers. You think also of like Heatherwick and Bjarke Ingels' work for Google, for example, is like very heavily reliant on those sorts of references. But yeah, so the linear city is something which has been around as an idea since the 19th century. It's broadly got like 3 ages, I would say. There's like one where it's basically a form of garden cities. It's like it's like contemporary with Ebenezer Howard, and there's a guy called Arturo Soria, who's a Spanish, I think, contemporary of Howard, whose idea was that you make linear cities which kind of join together existing towns, and they allow for a very kind of low intensity inhabitation of the landscape. So people can have big houses and gardens with lots of space, and everyone is also close to the countryside. It's exactly the same kind of basic idea about technology as Howard's garden cities, which are that the modern technology of transportation means that with a different kind of urban plan, everybody could have the best of both the city and the countryside at the same time.
And we have various of the properties of what is the linear city here already, right at the beginning, which is there is a transport spine.
Yeah.
And in this idea of a city, like many subsequently, it's a transport spine that would exist anyway. It goes between 2 places.
Yeah.
And then coming off that is a kind of repeating unit of a sort of mat of neighborhoods, which to an extent are repeating and contain some of the local amenities that you would need in walking distance. I expect they would contain, like the local shop and the pub and the hairdresser and whatever, pharmacy. And then as soon as you get behind the houses, you're in the country.
Yeah, that's it.
So everyone can be the best of both. The heart of the city, in the in the midst of the wild, facing one way and the other.
And it's all
clear
very
from the city's smog and mire.
Yeah.
And that's the conceit. Empowered by this transportation spine.
And obviously, like, linear development is something which sort of happens anyway. Like, people do develop along roads.
Yeah.
And this is one of these ideas where it's like, well, if we took something which is a kind of phenomenon which arises anyway, but we did it in a much more deliberate way, then there's the opportunity to produce a much better outcome, so that we kind of think it through when we plan and we have limits on it and that kind of thing. You can ensure
high minimum standards, conformity, and basically good public provision.
Yeah. So this is like circa 1880, I think, and he did. He was a developer, and there is a neighbourhood in Madrid, which is laid out by him. Although, like,
and it has other properties.
People have built on the countryside bit though.
Yeah, his proposals are not like straight. They don't emphasise the mechanical. They kind of emphasise some elements of the picturesque.
Yeah, definitely.
In their aesthetic. The cross section's got like twee houses and trees, and it's trying to emphasise, in a way, it's an anti-urban.
Yeah,
vision.
Absolutely. And then I would say, like, the next time that it's a big kind of thing is sort of interwar. So that's going from like. The kind of iconic scheme is the plan for Magnitogorsk in the Soviet Union, which was, I think, originated by Ernst May, but the famous scheme that everyone's seen, people have probably seen pictures of, is the
taken up very much by Rem Koolhaas later on.
Yeah, is the competition scheme for it by Ivan Leonidov, which there's a Rem Koolhaas lecture about, which is very good. Putting his kind of inimitable Koolhaas spin on everything. The idea of this, I've completely forgotten. There is someone who kind of formulated it before, but this one is much more about the problem of how to combine where people live and where people work, as well as this problem of like city and countryside and kind of health-giving surroundings and all this sort of thing. So it's not the garden city idea is kind of it's kind of established. We know about that, but there is also a problem in the Soviet Union about this division between the peasantry and the urban proletariat. There's a kind of problem of also like if you live in like Moscow, that's obviously like the center of things. And then some people live in a provincial city and they might have a lesser status or something like that. So there's something sort of problematic about the urban core generally because of the way in which it generates a sort of status hierarchy. So the linear city is sort of a way to like spread everything out and have this truly like equitable relationship between people, geography, city and country, home and work.
And so, to describe the scheme a little bit more, it's a grid of squares in a line. It's 3 deep. The central spine, the central like row of lines is each square's got its own kind of self-contained thing.
So we're looking at
has a very particular graphical quality.
Yeah, this is a bit zoomed in actually. So the bit that we're looking at is this is zoomed into the residential bit. So the way it works is that there's a kind of transportation spine. And then there's a zone of like residential, which is got an awful lot of park and recreation in it. It's very low density. Then on the other side of the transportation spine, which you can see in this image, there's a more park. And then actually there is, I think beyond that, an industrial zone. So there's like this kind of green belt between one and the other to separate people. But people generally, what the kind of competition scheme focuses on the residential bit.
This has some similarities with the previous notion and some differences. Similarities is that it is sort of urban but anti-urban. It's wanting to have a hierarchical city, which doesn't really have a centre, which makes sense in the ideology, but also because we're in that period where the centre of cities were the centres of a lot of the social problems. Crash industrialisation is not very nice if you are at the sharp end of it, and so people reasonably had some negative associations with that. And so at this time there were a whole series of kind of anti-urban, like our new late industrial society is going to be a society without conventional cities and without their problems. Its iconography is also, I think, important. And a linear city has an immense iconographic power.
Yeah.
And we've kind of got to admit that, like, part of the reason for this is the charisma of this iconic form.
Yeah.
And this particular one has an extremely appealing graphical power as well.
Yeah.
And it's a power which is modern.
Yeah, totally modern.
This is a city for the machine age, graphical, very exciting, new, charismatic, and that makes sense in the politics of the time, which is very much not what the kind of bucolic back to the countryside proposals we saw earlier are.
No.
I think it's worth emphasising that because when we're dealing with Neom, we will have to think about what various different what they're getting out of a linear city.
Yeah.
And this is a very charismatic proposal. And in fact, something that's interesting for me when I was thinking a little bit about this proposal is they sort of did something. Not anything with the graphical quality of the linear city, but if you think of the plans of Volgograd or Magnitogorsk, well, Volgograd, I know the plan a bit better. They kind of are linear cities.
Yeah, yeah.
And they kind of are cities which, I mean, in the case of Volgograd, it's laid out by the river, and it's a succession of things, each of which are in contact with the transport spine of the river. There's the kind of huge process of the various industrial plants, and then residential zones, which are laid out in a way which is very different to the hierarchy that we would think of either of the like American car city or the kind of old world city, and it's not that it. In a way, you could see the Leonidov proposal as a kind of graphical rendition of something that was really attempted.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I think probably the kind of latest and most relevant incarnation of this is in the 60s and 70s as a kind of form of paper architecture. And the most...
Well, I mean, this one is a satirical provocation.
Yeah, so this is by Superstudio, this work called Continuous Monument, which is developed over a whole series of different perspective collages often onto like postcards or like photos of landscapes, and they depict this totally blank, kind of gridded, like minimally expressed kind of continuous building. There's never really any sense of what's going on inside it. You only ever see the outer surface of it. Sometimes there are people on top of it or kind of walking around on it. Sometimes it's kind of the surface of the earth, and there are kind of little kind of bits of kind of stuff coming through it or whatever. But there's never any sense of it having any kind of interior. It's completely like exterior form. And as you say, yeah, it's like deeply ironic.
Yeah, I mean, they did other cities. You know, they proposed a city for when everyone's bodies have been killed in a nuclear war, a giant cube to inhabit, filled with the jars of everyone's brains. Or there's a little sketch for one which is, it's a sort of rolling factory that like chews up the earth in front of it and continuously lays city behind it, which then slowly suffers urban decay and then collapses, leaving these sort of... And in these images, which are kind of like mirrored sky grid with a bit of... They seem to be criticisms of the problems of modernity and jokes. The era of the response to the earnestness of modern architecture.
Yeah.
That's how it feels to me. Like, well, it turns out that we are not in a utopia. This is a kind of post-utopia. I mean, they're very ambiguous, but they're not. It was definitely not meant to be a serious proposal for how to make things better.
Yeah, no one was gonna build this. That was never the intention. Yeah, well, I mean, there's nothing obvious about it really. I've always
They're cool.
Yeah, they are cool. They're beautiful images. They are enigmatic.
Cool House's student project, the Voluntary Prisoners of Architecture, owes a lot to this.
Oh yeah, obviously.
That said, a little crash course in the things that, off the top of our heads, we could remember about linear cities.
So I find something very weird about this contemporary moment where all of that sort of somewhat obscure to non-architectural people kind of history is suddenly being like weaponized and deployed by international teams of consultants on behalf of the Saudi monarchy. Like,
yeah.
I think that's not a thing I would have predicted happening. And if you think like, you know, we just finished talking, we're doing this Richard Rogers thing where he's sort of talking about the kind of inertia in the way that people think about new cities and the feeling that they should build like a grid of roads and have cars everywhere. And indeed, if you look at the new city which the Egyptians are building next to Cairo, it's exactly that. It's exactly the paradigm which he was complaining about in Shanghai in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And which people have been building for years before that.
Like
and which
the new capital of Myanmar.
Yeah,
or,
exactly. That is still...
which I forget the name of.
Yeah.
But in many ways, this city is like obeys very many of what Richard Rogers was talking about for the city after that.
Yeah. It's dense.
It's dense. It's like central to it is the public, the communal public space where accidental public life can notionally occur.
Yeah.
That is the core of the city. It's also a city which is notionally from the bottom up built around technological visions of how to be sustainable in the kind of era of energy crisis.
Yeah.
And
apart from the small matter of existing.
Well, like in all these cases, it's sort of strange because it's in every aspect is extremely unconvincing if examined logically. I would say it falls down on all of them.
Yeah.
The only thing that really, like, in terms of its intent, seems to not be like Rogers' vision for the perfect city is that it hides its services. Inside outing of the Pompidou Centre, they bury all the pipes. They even bury the shops. Or it's very unclear what you actually see when you look down. The most recent views are you look down a canyon, you can't ever actually see that far, which is funny because the one thing about this is you would think you'd be able to see 100 miles down this canyon, and that would be an amazing crash perspective that would be really strange.
You can't see that far because of the curvature of the Earth. I mean,
Well, yeah, but you would be able to see a long way. You'd be able to see an awful lot further than they show. What they show is a kind of verdant.
Well, yeah, you can't see because all of the
mist.
water vapor everywhere. Yeah.
It's very ambiguous as to what's behind all those trees. It sort of feels like they're covering the nakedness of the fact that there's nobody there.
Well, there are people in some of the renderings. Here you go.
I liked the one with the DJs.
I like this one. There's like a cute girl in a beanie hat having a picnic on.
Yeah, but like when there are people, they're often in a corner.
Yeah.
And their immediate surroundings is clipped off. It's like they're sort of on a plinth. They're there. And then you have no mid-ground. You just have this distant view of a techno kind of cyberpunk landscape.
There's this incredible like over-articulation of sort of form and circulation. Everything is a canyon crossed by multiple sort of cyberpunky bridges with like innumerable glittering
which sort of speaks to the notion of like Richard Rogers' sort of public space. Something that you would want to explore. And then you think, it goes on for 100 miles.
Yeah.
Or does it? But, I mean, even if it doesn't, they're like sci-fi book covers.
Well, they're like actually these kind of AI-generated images, aren't they?
Very. But, I mean, I feel that those AI images were kind of
probably trained on these. Yeah.
Trained on stuff. I don't think neural networks are not like creating stuff from whole cloth.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, we spent a bit of time there, like talking about the linear city, and in many ways this seems to defy a lot of the logic. There are other bits of city we talked about, this industrial facility, a facility in the mountains, and the line spans from the sea into the mountains.
Yeah.
But the proposal is to have the other built bits nowhere near it, so that it kind of makes like a division sign with.
Yeah.
They are. Instead of running between them, it runs completely against the grain.
Yeah.
So it's not like a transport spine going between places.
No, it's just within itself.
And it doesn't seem to speak to any relationship. The relationship with the outside world is a mirrored facade, such that if you're in the desert at a sufficient distance, you sort of don't see it's there.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
obviously you do, but like...
That's because much of the land is more or less uninhabitable, isn't it? Like,
except by the sparse population that currently inhabits it.
I suppose, yeah.
I mean, the thing that's rendering it uninhabitable currently is the Saudi government.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just mean like if you transplant some like blockchain guys from like Miami and then put them outside, they'll die.
They'll die. I mean, it's extremely harsh landscape. Okay. So we've pointed out some contradictions. Why do you think this was the thing that was proposed? Or how do you think this idea came into being? Because it seems very curious.
I think there must be a certain amount of like the path dependency of yes and...
Yeah, as we saw in the Palace of the Soviets.
Like step one is we're going to spend like 200 billion or whatever the initial commitment was on a smart city in this place. That was the initial commitment. But like
200 billion seems woefully inadequate for anything.
It's gone up. It's gone up.
You're not going to get anything like this.
It has gone. I think it's gone up to 5, which is still much too little. But it's
you're not going to get anything like that for 500 billion. I mean, that's not going to get you. Yeah. That's not going to get you any of this. Hopelessly not enough.
But it's that's the that was the kind of initial commitment was we're going to do this in that place, and then there was a bit where it was like, oh no, that looks too much like kind of things that already exist, and then at some point someone came up with the idea of the line, and I think that is the kind of unknown story is
because I mean ways it's talked about.
Yeah.
It's been consistently talked about that the city is going to be a city without cars.
Yeah.
Like back to Rogers' vision of the future. It's got to be locally walkable and then linked together by rapid transport.
Yeah.
Which kind of speaks to the repeating module of a linear city. Although obviously it's much easier to achieve that with literally any other shape of city.
Yeah.
The reason that the linear cities, there's the famous proposal for putting one like from Boston to New York.
Yeah.
Which is basically like a mega structure on top of a motorway.
Yeah.
And the reason is that the motorway's there anyway. The reason for the Spanish ones is you're connecting things, so you've got the high-speed transport, and you put things along it.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you want to connect people by easy, rapid transport, having the city in a circle... I mean, they're saying this is going to be 200 metres wide and, 170 kilometres long. How big would it be if it was a circle? 35 square kilometres.
Oh, if you make the whole thing, like a filled-in circle.
Yeah, filled-in circle.
Oh, I was thinking if you just made like a
ring.
Empty circle.
No. A filled-in circle. 35 square kilometres. 6.5 kilometres across in diameter.
Well, they could do that one next. That's also a powerful shape.
Yeah. Which would just be a sort of... You'd have just these walls. You could wrap one wall in a spiral.
Yeah. That would be nice as well. Yeah.
But you could actually skip the mass transport. You could just get everywhere in 15 minutes on a bicycle.
I don't want to cycle when it's like 56 degrees
The whole
outside.
thing's air conditioned, isn't it? I mean, the inside of that's got to be air conditioned. There's no possible way that doesn't have a roof on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be unlivable.
It is true that the visuals are all striving towards a kind of sublime kind of experience, which is very different from the other sorts of linear cities, which are all very kind of clear. And I suppose it has a bit to do with the Superstudio one, which is playing a bit on like notions of the sublime and landscape and these sorts of things. But this is going even further. It's going into sort of pure art station kind of dreamscape.
It's very weird. Previous visions of the line would basically just like little... Like you just kind of ground up some buildings and sprinkled them in a row. Surrounded by, they talk a lot about like all the water they're going to desalinate. And they're going to desalinate so much water that it becomes like a prairie.
Yeah.
Full of vegetation.
Yeah, they'll have quite bad impact on the surrounding sea.
Actually, they're going to just desalinate the water and then they're going to have magical uses for all of the super saline brine. They're just going to suck seawater up.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I suppose that's okay then. It can come in from other places.
Well, I mean, even without like really getting into the obvious problems with this.
I think just to come back to it, why have they come up with this? I think it's yes and I think the other thing is upping the ante.
Yeah.
If you're what this has been produced by is like literally every consultant in the world, and every like big multinational consultant, all kinds of different people. They've approached so many people, including like people from Hollywood who work on Marvel movies. There are various architects. We should say like Rogers, as far as I know, are not involved at all with it. But although I do know one or two architects who are, but
no one wants to be.
No one wants to be publicly connected
earner.
with it, but they do pay very, very well. And I think that what happens is like a message has gone out. MBS wants vision, and the only thing which is going to piss him off is too little vision. So everyone keeps upping the ante, and this is where we've got to. And I think the only place to go next is to up it further.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, it's ended up with something that feels a bit like the Palace of the Soviets, which was not a good build. This isn't good architecture.
It would be pretty funny if they built any of it.
Yeah, but it'd be horrendous. Like, it's not like... This doesn't look like the cutting edge of what people consider good architecture. This isn't like, do the best thing.
No.
It looks kind of cheesy.
It's very cheesy, yeah. Also, what is any of it for?
No, it's just nonsense. I mean, it's not like...
What's utopian about it is that there's no productive activity, really. It's sort of like if everyone's job was living...
There's no inside. Have you seen the inside of anything?
The inside is sort of suggested in the background of some of these images. But it's a bit like, this is a place where your job is living in a 5-star hotel. That's kind of like... That's what it feels like. It's got... everything is deciding like which garden to go into or which swimming pool to swim in or
and
whatever.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. And I guess, robots will make it possible somehow.
Yeah. And this is going to be the productive future.
Yeah, and then you've got to imagine, what is everyone doing here? They're living, I guess. They seem to be doing a certain amount of disco, or maybe that's just what it looks like when you go shopping.
They're genetically modifying each other and teaching learning algorithms how to control each other's lives.
Maybe they're making NFTs or something like that.
Yeah.
Bit of that.
In the Octagon, people are making robots.
Yeah, there's definitely that. That one I can sort of. That one, I can understand what's going on there.
Yeah, the line. I'd rather live in Belgium.
I think it should
like
have...
if you're saying something, you want something the size of Belgium with the population of Belgium to move your business to.
Yeah. Have you considered Belgium?
Have you considered Belgium?
Real Belgium.
It's real Belgium. It's got a nice habitable environment. It's, like this thing has supposedly got millions of people living in it. You just don't see them. No. It would be absolutely full. Like 9 million people in 35 square kilometers.
Yeah.
That's 1 million people every 4 square kilometers.
Yeah.
1 million people every 4 square kilometers.
Yeah. Have you considered doing Logan's Run? But
yeah, I mean,
but for real.
Yeah, but just to make it full.
Yeah.
You know. And it all seems to be park. 1 million people for every 4 square kilometers is a lot.
Yeah. Right. Well,
250,000 a square kilometer. Square kilometer is so every person gets 4 square meters.
Okay. Of ground.
Of ground, yeah. They're all stacked up, presumably. But a lot of this is actually not stacked up. Most of it isn't in the walls. The walls are only occupying a little percentage.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's see what they propose next. Maybe they'll start building it. I've been told the way that they're designing it now, the next stage of the design is that they've taken the line and they've parcelled it up into 2.5 kilometres at a time.
Yeah.
And they're giving it to different architects. This is pure hearsay, but the fee is very big.
Yeah. I mean, presumably, if you're some things there actually are sort of building some bits of Sharm el Sheikh type stuff at airport, and some palaces and things along the coast.
Yeah,
and there's a kind of contractor village. There's a I love Neom sign, and presumably you just sort of start at one end.
Yeah, they had some pics of there's a Bloomberg story with a lot of pics of the contractor village. It's a pretty strange, pretty strange environment. It looks a bit like Leonidov, actually.
Yes.
But more fortified.
Yeah. It's got a little bit of if you were going to build a strange penal colony out in the desert.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel good thinking about this.
Yeah.
I think the people who are taking lots of money to be part of this should feel slightly queasy about themselves.
Yeah. Well, it depends how much money, doesn't it?
Sure. They're all fine, these people. They're all fine. They don't need it. McKinsey does not need this.
Yeah.
It's not making them look good. Boston Consulting doesn't need the contract to, what's the best way of evicting everybody? It's not,
Yes. Yeah, if you are working on it, let me know. I'm always interested to know who's there.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's not very hard to if you look on the internet to find out who's sort of done some things.
That's probably enough.
Who's he going to kill next?
Who's he going to kill next? Yeah, that will be
various opposing. Most famously Khashoggi, but he is certainly not the only person who died for this particular vanity project. It's horrible.
Yeah, Prince Charles, watch your mouth.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is a really, really horrible edge.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think we can elucidate this a great deal more. I'm not sure we've elucidated it much at all. As soon as you dig into anything, there's no information. It's just nonsense.
Yeah.
There's lots of people who've been paid a lot of money to talk absolute shit. To speak completely you've got a straight face. Straight face.
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
Yeah. If you laugh, you may be executed.
Yeah.
Yeah. They won't let you get back on the plane.
Yeah. So that's Neom.
That's Neom.
All over social media and everything in every marketing.
Yeah.
Promotable
Sweepstake.
spot at the
What
moment.
shape of city are they going to do next?
What if we just rotated this 90 degrees
Oh yeah,
and it was just vertical?
that would be cool. Ah, space elevator. Yeah.
Or sunk into the earth? What if it actually goes 170 kilometers down?
Yeah. It'll get hot actually quite fast.
Yeah.
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 Maybe that's good.
That's
good.
good.
I mean, it's hot to start with. I
Yeah.
guess you're not going to notice.
Yeah, I think the one where actually it's a factory. I think Oxygen is at the front
Yeah.
and it just chews its way across the peninsula,
Okay. Yeah.
spitting out. You kind of feed in designs. Each architect gets a sort of moment of Oxygen time, and it slowly kind of trails out, leaving this strange trail of like star architecture.
Yeah. It becomes like yeah, Factorio
Yeah.
style. Yeah.
Like all kind of like there's a big nuclear reactor, and it's just sort of spitting out like it's kind of sucking minerals out of the ocean and like making this strange land.
Right. Wow.
Well, rich stuff. Not, I would say, a balanced diet with all your greens and goodies.
No.
Very much uncomfortably rich sweeties, but we'll see what happens next.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Good night.